First source of energy is an energy-rich molecule called adenosine triphosphate, ATP, consisting of one adenosine molecule bonded to three phosphate molecules. Cellular replication occurs during higher energy demands, forcing the bond located in between the second and third phosphate to break. Energy is absorbed into the corresponding areas for muscular contraction. ATP is present for 2 seconds. To achieve complete renewal of ATP, the three energy systems must simultaneously coincide, allowing the three energy systems to interchange the predominant contributor of ATP resynthesis in accordance with the duration and intensity percentage of exercise performance. Exercise under maximal intensities immediately requires creatine phosphate, CP, for instantaneous ATP-CP resynthesis. This leads to repeated efforts under maximum intensities are available for 0 to 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, the lactic acid system becomes dominant and functions under anaerobic pathways as a series of chemical reactions decompose the glycogen stored in the bonds of muscle fibers, where the byproduct pyruvic acid reunifies ATP stores, counteracting the aerobic system for additional performance after 2 minutes of submaximal intensity. Peter Norman is a middle for the Australian national team. The role of the middle in touch football is to move the ball up the field as fast as possible to push the defence offside to open up a scoring opportunity. The middle in this case, Peter Norman, is usually the superior athlete regarding their body composition and ball skills compared to the winger, in this case Matt Prowse. Prior to the game, the body functions under aerobic conditions due to sufficient oxygen in correlation to the exercise requirements. As the game starts, Peter Norman has to switch from aerobic pathways to anaerobic. As this happens, the body goes into an oxygen deficit. The body goes into this phase when the aerobic system is desperately trying to catch up onto the oxygen demands of the body. In this example, the game starts, Norman is required to explode out and sprint forward to get a defensive touch, so the body switches to anaerobic pathways. At this stage, the ATP system is dominant, with the energy system contribution is at 90% and the lactic acid anaerobic system both at 5%. As Norman approaches 6 seconds, the body is able to do repeated high-intensity efforts as Norman sprints to get back on side, then doing a high-intensity repeated effort to get another defensive touch. Due to Norman's high-intensity repeated effort, there has been an insufficient recovery period to replenish the exhausted PC stores. This leads to the lactic acid system to increase its contribution to 40% as the ATP system decreases its contribution to 55% and aerobic system stays at 5%. After 20 seconds, Norman's maximal intensity continues to exceed the oxygen consumption. This prevents aerobic work. This example, Australia is able to move the ball up the field at high speeds, with Norman having a high usage rate, completing one roll ball and one pass, still being able to complete high-intensity repeated efforts. This allowing the lactic acid system to become the dominant source of the energy. This means Norman's pH levels in his muscles have started to decrease, causing reduced skeletal muscular contractions, conditioning him to maintain a high speed. This means Norman has reached his onset of blood lactate accumulation, or BLA, also referred to as lactate threshold, where rapid accumulation of lactate causes fatigue. This results in the 65% contribution of ATP resynthesis is from the lactic acid energy system, with 30% of the aerobic system and only 5 to 10% of the ATP-PC system. After 60 seconds, Norman is now performing prolonged movements as the lactic acid accumulation increases, which is due to an incomplete breakdown of stored carbohydrates, allowing muscular contractions to the corresponding areas. This leads to the lactic acid system and the aerobic system to work together, with both energy systems contributing 45% respectively towards the renewal of ATP supplies, while subsidizing 10% from the ATP-PC energy system. Despite the rising level of lactic acid, Norman is able to shift his dominancy to the ATP-PC system for a one-off singular high-intensity effort to get a cut-through pass to an open teammate for a try. Peter Norman is substituted off the field, where his body goes into excess post-exercise oxygen consumption phase, which is also referred to as EPOC, for an average of 2 minutes and 40 seconds per substitution. The first process of EPOC is termed as the alactacid, which involves the replenishment of ATP-PC system. For Norman to replenish the ATP-PC system, it will take 30 seconds for a 50% recovery and 2 to 3 minutes for a 100% recovery. To increase the speed of lactate removal, Norman will retain an elevated heart rate of 55 to 60% of his VO2 max to allow for efficient blood circulation. This allows with the conversion of lactic acid back to glycogen. This rotational strategy allows Norman to work at repeated high-intensity efforts on field. Matt Prowse is a wing for the Australian national team. The role of the wing in touch football is to spread the defense to create holes for the wing and other players to score. As the game starts, similar to Norman, Prowse goes into an oxygen deficit as intensity increases, but doesn't last nearly as long as Norman, as the body's oxygen consumption can catch up to the exercise requirements much quicker due to the sub-maximal low intensity of the winger's nature. After the oxygen deficit, Prowse returns to aerobic pathways now under steady-state exercise, as Prowse's aerobic system oxygen consumption is equivalent to his oxygen expenditure due to the winger's nature of active recovery. When called upon, Prowse switches to anaerobic pathways as the ATP-PC system is dominant here. After being on field for approximately 4 minutes, Prowse is able to switch into anaerobic pathways into the ATP-PC system as he catches the ball and sprints down the wing to score a try for a singular high-intensity effort. The lactic acid energy system is rarely dominant as a wing, rarely needed to do repeated efforts. The only time wings use a lactic acid system is when the middles are doing a substitution. Here, Prowse is called upon to help move the ball forward, getting 2 passes and a roll ball in 7 seconds, using his lactic acid system to complete high-intensity repeated efforts while the middles substitute on and off. Matt Prowse is subbed off with an average playing time of 4 minutes and 9 seconds on the field. There are 3 players out of the 14-player squad dedicated to the wing position. Prowse rotates with the wingers with the work-to-rest ratio of 2-1, interchanged approximately 7 times as he enters the epoch for an average of 2 minutes and 5 seconds. The 2-1 work-to-rest ratio is very different to Norman's 1-2 work-to-rest ratio. This allows Norman to perform repeated high-intensity efforts before being substituted off the field. This allows Norman to accumulate greater statistics compared to Prowse. Following the analysis of the Year 12s, where I played a game as a wing and a game as a middle in 2 amateur games of touch football, comparing my statistics as a wing to Matt Prowse, the correlation between Matt Prowse and my data profile was evident through the amount of ball we come in contact with, as we both designate ourselves to the outer of the field to open up space for our middles. Low intensity leads me to having an average heart rate of 138 beats per minute. This means I was on average functioning at my 68% of my VO2 max. This leading my aerobic system to accounting for 90% of ATP resynthesis, while the ATP-PC system and the lactic acid both contributed 5%. In conjunction with Prowse, the ATP-PC system was present as I received a pass as I exploded out to move the ball forward, it causing my heart rate to spike to a max heart rate of 173 beats per minute, where my ATP-PC system was dominant with a 90% contribution. Looking at the statistics, there was a huge similarities with the amount of ball we get as a winger, but there is a huge problem when comparing the data profiles, as in a Year 12 amateur game where we had no substitutions, leading to me having insufficient recovery time, although the active recovery component of the winger's nature allowed the PC and the ATP stores to slowly recover for a one-off maximal effort. As the whistle blows, Norman and I both switch to anaerobic pathways as we approach the 2-second mark, with the ATP-PC system contributing 9% to ATP resumption, with the lactic acid anaerobic system both contributing 5%, allowing Norman to sprint forward to get a defensive touch and I to get a roll ball, as the middle has to perform under high intensity with repeated efforts, which led to my statistics drastically increased while playing as a middle compared to a wing. As there was no recovery time, there was insufficient time for my ATP-PC system and lactic system to recover, which led to me becoming extremely fatigued playing as middle. The lactic acid was the primary contributor, which led to me jogging down the field and becoming offside multiple times. The continuous efforts with no recovery time led to me functioning on average of 85% of my VO2 max, while reaching a maximum heart rate of 191 beats per minute. When called upon, I was still able to make a one-off high-intensity effort as I make a pass to my teammate for a try.